You're not lazy, not undisciplined, not weak, not broken. So then why does everything feel so hard lately? Why does getting out of bed feel heavier than it used to? Why do small tasks feel big? Big tasks feel impossible. Why do you stare at your phone sometimes, knowing exactly what you should do, but your body just won't move? Like something inside you quietly unplugged. And you hate that feeling. Because this isn't you. At least, it didn't used to be. You used to have energy, plans, drive, focus. Now everything feels slower, heavier, foggy. You're still functioning, still showing up, still smiling when people look. From the outside, you look fine. But inside, everything feels like effort. Even resting feels tiring. Even sleeping doesn't fix it. And that's the confusing part. Because tired should go away after rest. But this doesn't. This stays. It follows you into the morning, sits with you all day, waits for you at night. A quiet weight on your chest. Not pain, not drama, just heaviness. Constant heaviness. So you try to fix it. You blame yourself first. Maybe I'm lazy. Maybe I need more discipline. Maybe I just need to try harder. Be stronger. Be sharper. Be better. So you push, force routines, force motivation, force productivity. And for a few hours, it works. Then you crash again, harder than before. Here's what nobody tells you, and I need you to really hear this. When effort keeps increasing, but your energy keeps decreasing, that's not laziness. That's depletion. That's burnout. And burnout doesn't always look dramatic. It doesn't always look like collapse. Sometimes it looks exactly like you. Quiet, functioning, exhausted. Still doing life, just without feeling alive inside it. Burnout is sneaky. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It shows up as procrastination, numbness, distraction, scrolling for hours, avoiding simple things, wanting to care, but not having the energy to try. And because you're still working, people assume you're fine. So you assume you're the problem. You think something is wrong with you. But what if nothing is wrong with you? What if you're not lazy at all? What if you're not broken? What if you're just tired in a way sleep can't fix? Tired in your mind, tired in your emotions, tired in your nervous system. The kind of tired that settles deep, the kind that makes life feel heavier than it should. Because here's the truth most people never learn. Burnout isn't weakness. It's what happens when you've been strong for too long, without real recovery, without breathing space, without permission to stop. You didn't fail. You just carried too much for too long. And this audiobook is not here to push you, not here to motivate you, not here to tell you to wake up at 5 a.m. or hustle harder. You've already tried that, and look how you feel. This is different. This is calm, gentle, honest. Think of this like someone sitting beside you, not pushing, not judging, just explaining what's really happening inside you. Because once you understand burnout, you stop blaming yourself. And when you stop blaming yourself, healing actually begins. So if you've been wondering, what's wrong with me lately? Why everything feels heavier? Why you're tired even after resting? Why life feels harder than it used to? Nothing is wrong with you. You're not lazy. you're burned out. And for the next few hours, we're going to slowly untangle this together. Gently. No pressure, no shame, no force. Just clarity, understanding, and small steps back to yourself. This isn't about becoming super productive. It's about feeling human again, feeling light again, feeling like yourself again. So exhale. Let your shoulders drop. You don't have to perform here. You don't have to prove anything. Just listen. Because this is a calm place to begin again.
Chapter 1. The Wrong Label. Why calling yourself lazy is making everything worse. When the name doesn't fit. There is a word many people use when they don't understand what's happening to them. Lazy. They say it quietly to themselves. Sometimes they say it out loud. I'm just lazy. I don't have discipline. I don't push myself like I used to. And every time they use that word, something heavy settles inside them. Because laziness isn't neutral. It carries judgment. It carries shame. It suggests a flaw in character. And when you believe you are the problem, you stop looking for the real cause. This chapter exists for one reason: to take that word out of your hands. Because for most people listening to this, it does not fit. Let's slow down for a moment. Think about your day. You wake up. You get through what needs to be done. You answer messages. You show up where you must. You don't disappear from life. But something feels off. The energy isn't there. The spark is gone. Simple things feel heavy. Not painful. Not dramatic. Just heavier than they should. So you assume the worst. I must be lazy now. I've lost my drive. I've changed. But here's the truth most people miss. Lazy people don't care. They don't feel guilt for not trying. They don't feel frustrated by their lack of energy. They don't sit quietly wondering what's wrong with them. If you are listening to this audiobook, you are not lazy. You are concerned. You are confused. You are tired. And those are not character flaws. Laziness is about avoidance. Burnout is about depletion. They look similar on the surface, but underneath they are opposites. A lazy system avoids effort because it doesn't care. A burned-out system avoids effort because it cannot recover fast enough. One is disinterest. The other is exhaustion. Here's a simple test. When you think about the things you're not doing, does it bother you? Do you wish you could want them again? Do you miss the version of yourself who had energy? If the answer is yes, then laziness is not the problem. The wrong label creates the wrong solution. When you call yourself lazy, you try to fix yourself with pressure. You push harder. You shame yourself. You compare yourself to who you used to be. And that only makes things worse. Because pressure does not restore energy. It drains it faster. Burnout rarely arrives loudly. It doesn't always come with a breakdown. Sometimes it comes quietly. You still function. You still perform. You still smile when needed. But inside, you are running on reserve. And reserve does not refill through force. Here is what many people never realize. Burnout is not failure. It is information. It is your system saying, this way of living is costing more than it's giving. And when you mislabel that message as laziness, you ignore what your body is trying to tell you. you turn wisdom into self-attack. Let's talk about effort. You've tried to push, haven't you? You've told yourself, just do it. Just get started. Other people manage. And maybe it works for a moment. You get a short burst, a good day, a productive hour. Then the crash comes back stronger. That cycle is not laziness. That is overdrawn energy. Think of your energy like a battery. Not a motivation battery. A nervous system battery. Every demand drains it. Work, expectations, emotional labor, being on. If the battery is never allowed to recharge properly, it doesn't matter how badly you want to move. The system will resist. And here's the part that hurts the most. Because you still look fine on the outside, you assume you're exaggerating. You tell yourself other people have it worse. So you dismiss your own experience. That dismissal is where the damage deepens.
Burnout doesn't mean you are weak. It often means you were strong for too long. You carried responsibility quietly. You adapted. You kept going until your system learned that rest was never coming. So it slowed you down itself. Not to punish you, to protect you. This is the part most people never hear. Burnout is a protective response. It is your system saying, if I don't slow you down, something worse will happen. And instead of listening, we call ourselves lazy. The wrong label keeps you stuck, because you don't recover from burnout by trying harder. You recover by understanding what drained you. And that requires honesty, not judgment. Let me say this clearly. If effort feels heavier than it used to, that doesn't mean you've lost discipline. It means the cost of effort has increased, and cost matters. This chapter is not here to give you a solution yet. It's here to remove the blame, because you cannot heal something you keep attacking, and you cannot listen to your body while calling it broken. So for now, do one thing. Stop using the word lazy. Replace it with curiosity. Ask, what has been draining me? What have I been carrying? What haven't I been allowed to feel? Those questions open doors. Shame closes them. In the next part of this chapter, we'll talk about why this mislabeling became so common and how a culture of constant output trained us to ignore early signs of burnout. For now, let this land. You are not lazy. You are tired in a way that deserves understanding. And that changes everything. How the world taught you to blame yourself. The reason so many people call themselves lazy is not because they are, it's because they were taught to. From early on, effort was rewarded, rest was questioned. If you slowed down, someone asked why. If you struggled, you were told to try harder. If you felt overwhelmed, you were told to be grateful. And if you couldn't keep up anymore, the assumption was simple: something must be wrong with you. We live in a culture that celebrates output but misunderstands energy. Doing is visible, depletion is not. So when someone stops producing at the same level, people don't ask what happened to them. They ask what's wrong with them. And eventually, you start asking yourself the same question. That's how the wrong label enters quietly. Burnout is not dramatic enough to be taken seriously. It doesn't always come with tears. It doesn't always come with collapse. Sometimes it comes with numbness, with detachment, with quiet resistance. And because there's no emergency, you assume you don't deserve support. You tell yourself, I should be able to handle this. But ability is not infinite. Capacity changes based on load, and no one asks how heavy your load has been. Think back. How long have you been carrying responsibility without relief? How long have you been adapting instead of resting? How long have you been strong because you had to be? Strength without recovery turns into exhaustion, not overnight, over time. This is why burnout feels confusing. You can't point to one moment. There was no single failure, no single breaking point, just a slow erosion, a little less patience, a little less motivation, a little less joy, until one day you notice you don't recognize yourself. And instead of asking, "What happened to my energy?" you ask, "What happened to my discipline?" That question hurts because it attacks your identity. It suggests you've become someone lesser. But discipline didn't disappear, it was exhausted. Burnout changes how effort feels in the body. Things that once felt neutral now feel heavy. Things that once felt exciting now feel draining. This doesn't mean you stopped caring, it means your system is conserving what little it has left. That's not failure, that's intelligence. Here's something most people never hear. Your body will slow you down when your mind refuses to. It doesn't ask permission, it doesn't explain itself, it simply changes the signal. Motivation drops, energy fades, resistance increases. Not to punish you, to protect you. But protection looks like laziness when you don't understand it. So you fight it. You override it with caffeine, with pressure, with guilt. And for a while, you can still perform. But performance without recovery deepens burnout. Eventually, even guilt stops working. That's when people feel scared. Why can't I push myself anymore? The answer is not that you've lost willpower, it's that your system has reached a limit. Limits are not moral failures, they are biological facts. Calling burnout laziness turns a signal into a flaw. And when you believe you are the flaw, you stop listening. You don't ask what needs to change, you just demand more from yourself. That demand creates internal conflict. One part of you is exhausted, another part is angry about it, and you live in the tension between them. This is why self-talk becomes harsh. Get it together. Stop being weak. Other people manage. Those words don't motivate, they threaten. And threatened systems shut down, not because they want to, because they must. Burnout is not cured by criticism, it is worsened by it. Understanding is the first form of relief. Not solutions, not plans, just being accurately named. You are not lazy. You are burned out in a world that didn't teach you how to stop. This chapter matters because names shape behavior. If you think you are lazy, you'll try to force yourself. If you understand you are burned out, you'll start asking better questions. Questions like, what am I still doing out of habit? What am I afraid to stop? What rest have I postponed for too long? Those questions don't shame you, they guide you. You don't need to be fixed, you need to be understood. And that understanding begins here, by removing the wrong label and replacing it with truth. In the next chapter, we'll talk about something many people miss, how you can be burned out even if you're still functioning, even if you're still showing up, even if no one around you sees the problem. Because burnout doesn't always break you. Sometimes it keeps you barely holding on. And barely holding on is not the same as living, but it is where many people are. If that's you, you're not alone. And now you're finally naming it correctly.
Chapter 2. Burnout without breaking. Why you can be burned out even if you're still functioning. When nothing looks wrong. One of the hardest things about burnout
is that nothing looks broken. You wake up. You go to work or school. You answer messages. You do what's expected. From the outside, your life looks fine. And because it looks fine, you assume it must be. This is where confusion begins. You feel exhausted, but you can't explain why. You feel disconnected, but nothing terrible has happened. You feel heavy, but you're still standing. So you tell yourself it doesn't count. If I were really burned out, I wouldn't be functioning. But that belief is wrong. Burnout does not always announce itself with collapse. Sometimes it adapts. It learns how to keep you moving while quietly draining you. This is what functional burnout looks like. You are not falling apart. You are slowly wearing down. And because you're still working, still responding, still showing up, you don't give yourself permission to take what you're feeling seriously. Functional burnout is especially dangerous because it hides behind responsibility. You keep going because people depend on you. Because stopping feels selfish. Because slowing down feels like failure. So you adapt instead. You lower your expectations. You numb your emotions. You do only what's necessary. Not because you don't care, because caring costs more energy than you have left. This is why many people say, "I don't feel like myself anymore." But they can't point to a reason. No accident. No heartbreak. No breakdown. Just distance. Distance from excitement. Distance from motivation. Distance from meaning. You're present, but not fully here. Functional burnout often sounds like this. I'm tired, but I can't rest. I'm busy, but nothing feels fulfilling. I'm doing things, but I'm not connected to them. It's not dramatic enough to alarm others, but it's painful enough to drain you. Here's an important truth. Burnout is not about how much you do. It's about how long you've done it without emotional recovery. You can be burned out from responsibility, not workload, from being needed, from being reliable, from being the strong one. None of that looks like a crisis, but all of it consumes energy. Think about how often you've said, "I'll rest after this project, after this exam, after this season." Now, think about how long after this has lasted. Months? Years? Functional burnout lives in postponed relief. You keep surviving now so you can live later. But later never arrives. Another reason functional burnout goes unnoticed is because it doesn't remove ability. It removes desire. You can still do things. You just don't feel pulled toward them anymore. And because ability is still there, you blame yourself for not using it. I should be able to do this. But should is not energy. And discipline cannot replace depletion. Burnout without breaking teaches you to ignore signals. You learn to push past tiredness. You normalize stress. You silence frustration until your system stops sending loud warnings. It switches strategies. Instead of pain, it gives you numbness. Instead of anxiety, it gives you detachment. Instead of collapse, it gives you distance. And because numbness feels quieter than pain, you mistake it for stability. But numbness is not peace. It's protection. Your system is conserving energy by reducing feeling. That's why joy feels muted. That's why excitement feels far away. That's why everything feels flat. Functional burnout keeps you alive, not fulfilled. It keeps you operating, not engaged. And because society rewards operation, you don't realize what you're losing until you start asking dangerous questions. Is this it? Why don't I care anymore? Why do I feel empty even when things are okay? Those questions don't mean you're ungrateful. They mean your system is tired of surviving. Let this sink in. You do not need to fall apart to deserve rest. You do not need to break down to acknowledge burnout. And you do not need permission from anyone else to take yourself seriously. In the next part of this chapter, we'll talk about why functioning burnout is so common and how being capable, responsible, and dependable often hides exhaustion the longest. For now, remember this. If you feel tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix, detached in a way you can't explain, and heavy even when life looks fine, that is not laziness. That is burnout without breaking.
When being capable becomes the mask. One reason burnout hides so well is because capability becomes camouflage. You've always been someone who manages, someone who figures it out, someone others rely on. So when your energy starts fading, no one notices, including you. You've been functional for so long that you assume functioning means you're fine. But functioning is not the same as thriving. Functional burnout often shows up in people who are good at adapting. You adjust your expectations, you lower the bar quietly, you do what's necessary and nothing more. From the outside, it looks like maturity. From the inside, it feels like shrinking. You stop dreaming as loudly. You stop planning far ahead. You stop wanting things intensely because wanting takes energy. So you tell yourself you've just grown up. But growth doesn't feel like disappearance. Burnout does. Being capable teaches you to ignore signals. You're used to discomfort. You've worked through stress before. So when your body whispers, you don't listen. You only respond when it screams. And functional burnout doesn't scream. It sighs. It sighs when you wake up tired even after sleeping. It sighs when things you once enjoyed feel distant. It sighs when effort feels heavier, but you keep going anyway. Those sighs are not weakness. They are warnings. Another reason functional burnout goes unnoticed is because it doesn't remove competence. You can still do the work. You just feel hollow doing it. And because you're still competent, you tell yourself you're exaggerating. If I can still do this, how bad can it be? Bad enough to disconnect you from yourself. Here's a quiet truth. Burnout doesn't always stop productivity. Sometimes it strips meaning instead. You keep producing, but nothing feels personal anymore. Your work becomes mechanical. Your days blur together. And because nothing is wrong, you don't know where to place the discomfort. Functional burnout thrives in silence. You don't talk about it because you can't explain it. I'm tired doesn't sound serious enough. I feel off sounds vague. So you stay quiet, and quiet suffering is easy to miss.
You may have noticed something else. Your tolerance is lower. Small tasks feel irritating. Noise feels overwhelming. You get drained faster by people you used to enjoy. That's not you becoming difficult. That's your nervous system being overloaded. Burnout without breaking shows up as irritability. Not anger, sensitivity. Your system doesn't have extra capacity anymore, so everything feels like too much. And still, you keep showing up. You meet expectations. You meet deadlines. You meet obligations while quietly losing connection. This is why burnout can last for years, not because people don't want to heal, but because they don't recognize what's happening. Let's talk about responsibility. Responsibility is not bad, but unrelenting responsibility without emotional release becomes draining. Being the dependable one often means you don't get to fall apart. You don't get to rest loudly. You don't get to stop. So your system adapts. It numbs. It detaches. It conserves. This is why burnout often affects people who care deeply, people who try, people who show up, people who don't want to disappoint. Burnout is not a sign you failed. It's a sign you carried too much alone. Here's something important. You don't need to justify burnout with suffering. You don't need trauma or tragedy or collapse. You only need prolonged strain without adequate recovery. And recovery is not just sleep. It's emotional safety. It's permission to stop performing. Many people rest physically but stay on mentally. They sleep but don't relax. They take breaks but don't disengage. So the exhaustion remains. This is why burnout doesn't resolve on its own. Functional burnout teaches you to live in survival mode, not emergency survival, quiet survival. You do just enough to get through, and because getting through works, you don't realize what it's costing you. But survival is not neutral. It slowly narrows your life. You stop exploring, you stop risking, you stop reaching, because all of that requires energy you don't have. Let this land. If you're functioning but disconnected, capable but exhausted, present but numb, that is burnout without breaking, and it deserves care. In the next chapter, we'll talk about something many people misunderstand: why trying harder doesn't fix burnout and often makes it worse. Because effort is not always the answer. Sometimes effort is the problem.
Chapter 3. When effort stops working. Why trying harder no longer helps and sometimes hurts. The moment pushing fails. There is a moment many people reach that is deeply confusing. They are doing everything they were told to do. They are pushing. They are trying. They are forcing themselves forward. And somehow, it isn't working anymore. Effort used to help. When you were tired before, you pushed and got results. When motivation dipped, you disciplined your way through. Trying harder worked until it didn't. This is where fear begins. Because when effort stops working, people assume something is seriously wrong. They think, I must be broken. I must have lost my edge. But what's actually happening is far more specific. Your system has changed, and effort is no longer the right tool. Let's talk honestly about effort. Effort is fuel. It costs energy to push yourself. When your system is healthy, that cost is manageable. You spend energy, and it replenishes. But when burnout enters, the math changes. Effort begins to cost more than it gives back. You push, but you don't recover. You force, but the relief never comes. And slowly, trying harder starts to hurt. This is the part many people misunderstand. Burnout does not mean you stopped trying. It means trying became unsustainable. And instead of adjusting, you doubled down. Think about how you respond when something stops working. Most people don't pause. They increase intensity. They wake up earlier. They cut rest shorter. They add pressure. Because effort has always been rewarded. Until now. Burnout changes how effort feels in the body. It no longer feels motivating. It feels heavy, resistant, painful. Not physical pain, mental friction. You may notice, tasks feel overwhelming before you start. Small things feel like big demands. You procrastinate, then feel guilty. Guilt makes you push harder. Pushing makes you more exhausted. That cycle is not laziness. It's a system in overload. When effort stops working, many people panic. They think, if I don't push, everything will fall apart. So they push more, and that panic accelerates burnout. Here's a difficult truth. Effort is not neutral. It activates your nervous system. When your system is already overloaded, effort feels like threat. That's why motivation disappears. Motivation is the desire to move. Burnout removes desire to prevent further damage. It's not betrayal, it's protection. This is why just try harder advice fails. It ignores the state of the system. It assumes energy is available. It assumes the body is willing. In burnout, it is not. Trying harder in burnout is like pressing the gas when the engine is overheating. You might move for a moment, but the damage increases. Eventually, the system forces a stop. This is why many people feel ashamed. They say, I know what to do, I just can't do it. That gap between knowledge and action creates self-doubt. But knowledge was never the problem. Capacity was. Effort without capacity creates collapse. Not immediately, gradually. You feel less resilient, less hopeful, less patient, less connected, until effort itself feels like danger. This is where avoidance begins, not because you don't care, but because caring costs too much. Your system says, not now, and instead of listening, you accuse yourself. That accusation deepens exhaustion. Burnout often worsens because people don't change strategies. They keep using effort for a problem effort cannot solve. That's like trying to shout over a smoke alarm. Noise doesn't fix the signal. Let's say this clearly. Effort is not the enemy, but it is not always the solution. There are times when pushing forward is the wrong direction. This chapter matters because many people are stuck here. They are exhausted, but still blaming themselves. They are trying harder, but falling further behind, and they don't know why. You are not failing effort. Effort is failing you because it's being used in the wrong season. In the next part of this chapter, we'll talk about something crucial. Why burnout requires a different response than motivation problems, and how learning to stop pushing is not quitting, it's intelligence.
When pushing becomes the problem. There is a moment when effort quietly turns against you. Not suddenly, not dramatically. It happens in small ways. You sit down to do something important and feel resistance before you even begin. You tell yourself, just start, but your body tightens. Your chest feels heavy. Your breath shortens. This is not laziness. This is your nervous system saying, this is too much. Burnout changes the relationship between effort and safety. Effort once felt purposeful. Now it feels threatening. not because the task is dangerous, because your system associates effort with prolonged strain. When effort stops working, your body begins to resist it automatically. This resistance shows up as procrastination. But procrastination here is not avoidance of work. It is avoidance of overload. Think about the last time you forced yourself to push. Maybe you succeeded, but what happened afterward? Did you feel relief, or did you feel emptier? Did you recover, or did the exhaustion deepen? That after effect matters more than the result. Burnout teaches the body to associate success with depletion. So even when you achieve something, your system doesn't celebrate, it braces. Because achievement has become expensive. This is why people say, "I get things done, but I feel nothing." Effort delivered outcomes, but stole meaning. And without meaning, effort feels pointless. Many people respond to this by escalating pressure. They say, "I just need discipline." So they remove rest, they add rules, they tighten control. And that works for a short time, until the resistance grows stronger. Because discipline without recovery feels like punishment. And punished systems don't perform better. They protect themselves. Protection looks like shutdown. This is the moment when effort becomes the enemy. Not because effort is bad, but because it is misapplied. Effort is a tool for growth. Burnout is a signal for repair. Using the same tool for both creates damage. Here's something few people understand. Burnout doesn't mean you should stop caring. It means you should stop forcing. Care and force are not the same. Care listens. Force demands. Care asks, "What do I need right now?" Force says, "Do it anyway." Burnout deepens when force ignores limits. Limits are not weakness. They are information. They tell you where repair is needed. Many people are afraid to stop pushing. They think stopping means losing everything. But stopping the wrong kind of effort creates space for the right kind. Effort that supports recovery. This is where confusion often peaks. You want to move forward, but movement hurts. You want to change, but trying feels dangerous. That doesn't mean you're stuck. It means your system needs a different signal. Burnout recovery does not begin with intensity. It begins with safety. Your body must believe that slowing down will not lead to collapse. That belief takes time. This is why motivational advice fails here. Motivation assumes capacity. Burnout removes capacity to protect you. So motivation feels insulting instead of helpful. Let's say this clearly. If pushing harder makes you feel worse, that is not a moral failure. It is a sign that effort is no longer the correct response. And recognizing that is wisdom, not weakness. This chapter is not asking you to quit. It's asking you to stop using force where care is required. There will be time for effort again, but not before recovery. In the next chapter, we will talk about how burnout builds slowly. Without crisis, without collapse, without warning signs anyone taught you to watch for. Because understanding how burnout accumulates helps you stop blaming yourself for not noticing it sooner. For now, let this settle. If trying harder no longer works, It doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're listening, perhaps for the first time. And listening is where healing begins.
Chapter 4. The Slow Drain. How burnout builds quietly over time. When nothing collapses. Most people expect burnout to arrive loudly. A breakdown. A moment where everything stops. A clear line between before and after. But burnout rarely works that way. Most of the time, nothing collapses. You keep going. You show up. You respond. You meet expectations. Life continues. And because life continues, you assume you should too. This is why burnout is missed so often. It doesn't interrupt your life, it quietly drains it. You don't fall apart, you thin out. Burnout is not one bad day, it is many small days stacked together. Days where you didn't quite recover. Days where you pushed through tiredness instead of listening to it. Days where rest was postponed because something else felt more urgent. Those days add up. The slow drain begins innocently. You take on a little more responsibility. You say yes when you mean maybe. You stay available longer than you should. Nothing feels wrong yet. You can still manage. Then your baseline shifts. What once felt normal now feels tiring. What once felt tiring now feels overwhelming. But because the change was gradual, you don't notice it happening. This is how adaptation hides burnout. You adjust to discomfort instead of questioning it. You normalize stress instead of addressing it. You assume exhaustion is just part of life. The slow drain often looks like maturity. You stop expecting too much from yourself. You become realistic. But realism without recovery turns into resignation. Burnout builds in moments like these. Skipping breaks because it's just today. Ignoring tension because everyone feels this way. Delaying rest because I'll do it later. Later keeps moving. Your system keeps paying. The body is patient. It compensates. It borrows energy from tomorrow. Again and again. At first, the cost is invisible. You still function. But borrowing without repayment always creates debt. Burnout is energy debt. The slow drain affects emotion before behavior. You feel less excited, less curious, less moved by things that once mattered. Joy becomes muted, not gone, just distant. You don't notice at first. You're busy adapting. Burnout also drains patience. Small things irritate you more easily. Noise feels louder. Requests feel heavier. This isn't because you've changed as a person, it's because your margin is gone. Margin is the space between demand and capacity. Burnout shrinks that space. As margin disappears, everything feels urgent, even things that aren't. Your system stays slightly tense, not in panic, in readiness. This constant readiness costs energy. It keeps your nervous system activated. Activated systems don't rest deeply. They remain alert. This is why sleep stops helping. You lie down, but your system doesn't fully power off. You wake up tired. And you tell yourself you need to try harder tomorrow. The slow drain is reinforced by silence. You don't talk about it because nothing seems bad enough. You don't complain because others depend on you. So the drain continues unnoticed. Burnout builds not because you ignored yourself once, but because you ignored yourself repeatedly. Not out of neglect, out of survival. Let this settle. Burnout is rarely caused by one thing. It's caused by too much, for too long, without enough recovery. And because it accumulates quietly, people blame themselves for not seeing it sooner. In the next part of this chapter, we'll talk about the subtle signs people mistake for personality change, and why noticing them earlier does not mean you failed. For now, understand this. If you didn't notice burnout arriving, it's because it didn't arrive. It crept in. And anyone can miss that.
When adaptation becomes exhaustion. One of the most dangerous things about burnout is how normal it feels while it's happening. You don't wake up one day and think, I am burning out. You wake up and think, I'm just tired. And tired sounds manageable. So you adjust. You drink more caffeine. You distract yourself more. You shorten your patience. You don't change your life. You change yourself. This is how burnout deepens. Instead of asking, why does this feel so hard? You ask, why can't I handle this better? That question keeps you stuck, because it turns exhaustion into a character issue. Burnout grows in people who adapt quickly. You find ways to cope. You become efficient at surviving. You stop noticing what survival is costing you. Here's something subtle. Burnout doesn't just drain energy. It drains hope. Not dramatically. Quietly. You stop imagining better futures. Not because you don't want them, because imagining feels pointless. You tell yourself, let's just get through today. And that sentence becomes a lifestyle. Getting through today replaces building a life. The slow drain also affects how you relate to time. Everything becomes short-term. You focus on what's urgent because long-term thinking feels overwhelming. Dreaming requires energy. Burnout takes that energy first. So you stay practical. You stop asking big questions. You stop risking disappointment. Another quiet sign of burnout is emotional flattening. You still feel things, just not fully. Sadness feels dull. Joy feels muted. Everything lands softer. This is not emotional failure. It's emotional conservation. Your system is reducing output to preserve itself. That's intelligent, but costly. Burnout also changes how you experience people. Conversations feel draining. Socializing feels like effort. You withdraw without realizing it. Not because you don't care, because connection requires presence. Presence requires energy, and energy is low. This is why people say, "I feel distant from everyone," even from those they love. Distance feels safer than engagement, because engagement asks for more than you have. Burnout also creates a strange relationship with rest. You rest, but you don't feel restored. You take breaks, but you don't feel lighter. Because the drain is not just physical. It's emotional, mental, nervous system deep. This is why vacations don't fix burnout. Time away doesn't reset a system that never felt safe to stop. You come back tired from your rest, confused. Another layer of the slow drain is constant self-monitoring. You're always checking yourself. Am I doing enough? Am I falling behind? Am I disappointing someone? That internal monitoring costs energy. Burnout is not always caused by work. It's often caused by pressure. Pressure to perform. Pressure to be stable. Pressure to not need too much. That pressure doesn't turn off. And when pressure becomes constant, the nervous system stays alert. Alert systems don't recover. They endure. Here's the part many people miss. Burnout doesn't happen because you're weak. It happens because you stayed strong for too long, without relief. If you've ever thought, "I should have noticed sooner," understand this. Burnout is designed to be missed. It hides in responsibility. It hides in capability. It hides in being needed. And by the time you notice it, it has already been there for a while. That does not mean you failed. It means you adapted. And adaptation kept you going. Now it's time to notice the cost. In the next chapter, we'll talk about something many people don't expect. Why rest alone doesn't fix burnout. And why sleep, breaks, and time off often fail to restore what's missing. For now, let this be enough. If you feel depleted but can't explain why, if nothing collapsed but something faded, you're not imagining it. You've been experiencing the slow drain.
Chapter 5. Why rest isn't fixing it. Sleep, breaks, and time off, and why they don't fully restore you. When rest doesn't reach the problem. One of the most confusing parts of burnout is what happens when you finally rest. You sleep more. You take time off. You slow down. And yet, nothing really changes. You wake up tired. You return feeling just as heavy. And that confusion hurts. You start to wonder if something is wrong with you. Why am I still exhausted? I rested. I did what everyone said. This is where self-blame sneaks in. Because rest is supposed to fix tiredness. But burnout is not just tiredness. Let's separate two things that often get mixed together: fatigue and burnout. Fatigue is physical.
Burnout is systemic. Fatigue improves with sleep. Burnout doesn't. Because burnout doesn't live in muscles. It lives in the nervous system. When people say, just rest, they usually mean physical rest. Sleep. Lying down. Doing nothing. That helps your body. But burnout is not just a body issue. Burnout comes from being on for too long. Mentally on. Emotionally on. Internally alert. And that on state doesn't turn off just because you lie down. You can be resting and still be activated. Have you ever slept for hours and still woken up tense? Have you ever taken a break and spent it worrying? That's not a failure to rest. That's rest not reaching the system that's actually exhausted. Burnout lives in constant readiness. Your system is always braced, listening for demands, preparing for the next task. That readiness costs energy even when you're doing nothing. This is why scrolling, watching shows, and lying in bed doesn't restore you. Those activities distract the mind, but don't calm the system. Distraction is not recovery. It gives relief, not restoration. Relief fades quickly. Restoration rebuilds slowly. Another reason rest doesn't fix burnout is because rest feels unsafe. Not consciously, internally. You've trained yourself to stay alert. Maybe because people rely on you. Maybe because things fall apart when you stop. Maybe because slowing down makes you anxious. So even when you rest, part of you stays on guard. That guarded state blocks recovery. Because recovery requires safety. And safety is not the absence of activity. It's the absence of threat. Burnout often comes from long periods where you didn't feel allowed to stop. So stopping now feels wrong. You feel guilty resting. Rest becomes stressful. And stressful rest is not rest. It's tension in disguise. Another misunderstanding is believing time alone heals burnout. Time helps injuries. Burnout is not an injury. It's a pattern. If the pattern doesn't change, time just repeats it. You rest, then return to the same pressure. So the system never resets. This is why weekends don't help. Why vacations don't last. Why you feel okay for a moment, then crash again. Because the environment hasn't changed. Burnout is not about needing more breaks. It's about needing a different relationship with effort, pressure, and safety. This chapter is not saying rest is useless. Rest matters. But rest without safety is incomplete. If you've been resting and still feel exhausted, you are not failing at rest. Rest is just not addressing the full problem yet. In the next part of this chapter, we'll talk about what kind of rest actually reaches burnout, and why recovery looks very different from stopping. Because healing burnout is not about doing nothing. It's about doing something different.
Recovery
is not the same as stopping. There is a quiet misunderstanding that keeps many people stuck. They believe rest means stopping. Stopping work, stopping effort, stopping responsibility. And when stopping doesn't heal them, they feel confused. But burnout is not cured by the absence of activity. It is healed by the presence of safety. That difference matters. You can stop moving and still feel threatened. Threat doesn't always come from outside. It often comes from expectation. Expectation to be available. Expectation to perform. Expectation to return unchanged. Many people rest while silently counting down, 2 days left, 1 more week, back to normal soon. That countdown keeps the system alert. You're resting with one eye open. Recovery asks for something harder than rest. It asks you to let go of urgency. Urgency is addictive. It makes you feel necessary. But urgency keeps the nervous system activated. It tells your body, stay ready. Bodies that stay ready don't repair deeply. This is why doing nothing can feel uncomfortable. Silence feels loud. Stillness feels wrong. Because your system has learned that stillness equals risk. Burnout recovery begins when the body learns a new rule. It is safe to slow down. That rule cannot be forced. It must be demonstrated. Demonstrated through consistency. Small moments where nothing bad happens when you stop pushing. Moments where you don't rush and the world doesn't collapse. That's how safety is rebuilt. Another reason rest doesn't fix burnout is because rest often becomes avoidance. You rest from things, but don't reconnect to anything. You numb out. You distract. Distraction gives relief, but relief fades. Recovery restores connection. Connection to the body. Connection to limits. Connection to what you actually feel. That reconnection can feel uncomfortable at first. Burnout recovery is not cozy. It's gentle, but honest. You start noticing how tired you really are, how tense you've been, how long you've ignored yourself. That awareness is part of healing. Many people quit recovery too early because it feels worse before it feels better. Not because it's harming them, but because numbness is wearing off. Feeling returns slowly. This is why people say, "I rested and now I feel emotional." That's not regression, that's thawing. Frozen systems feel nothing. Rest doesn't fix burnout because burnout is not about lack of sleep. It's about lack of permission. Permission to stop performing. Permission to be unfinished. Real recovery gives you permission to exist without output. Not forever, but long enough for your system to reset. Recovery also requires boundaries, not harsh ones, honest ones. Boundaries that protect energy before it's gone. This is why people relapse into burnout. They rest, but they return unchanged. Same expectations, same pressure, same internal rules. The drain resumes immediately. Recovery is not about going back. It's about returning differently, with awareness, with limits. This chapter matters because many people blame themselves for not resting correctly. But rest was never the full solution. It was one piece, an important one, but incomplete alone. If rest hasn't helped you, it doesn't mean you're broken. It means your system needs more than stopping. It needs safety, permission, and reconnection. In the next chapter, we'll talk about the nervous system and why burnout keeps your body stuck in survival mode even when danger is gone. Understanding that will change how you see your exhaustion. For now, let this settle. You are not failing to recover. Recovery just hasn't been fully explained to you yet.
Chapter 6. The Nervous System in Survival Mode. Why your body is stuck in on when the body doesn't get the message. One of the most frustrating parts of burnout is this feeling. I know I'm safe, so why doesn't my body feel that way? Nothing bad is happening. No emergency, no crisis, no immediate danger. And yet, your body stays tense, alert, braced, ready. This is not imagination. It's your nervous system. The nervous system has one main job: keep you alive. It does not care about productivity. It does not care about goals. It only cares about threat. And threat does not have to be dramatic. Threat can be subtle. Pressure, uncertainty, being needed constantly, never knowing when you're allowed to stop. Those register as danger. When danger lasts too long, the nervous system adapts. It stays on, not in panic, in readiness. This is survival mode. It's not loud. It's not obvious. It's quiet, constant activation. The body preparing just in case. Survival mode affects everything: sleep, digestion, focus, emotion. But because it's invisible, people blame themselves instead. I should be calmer. I should be grateful. I should handle this better. But calm is not a thought. It's a state. And states are controlled by the nervous system, not willpower. Your nervous system learns from repetition. If stress is constant, alertness becomes normal. If rest is inconsistent, safety feels unfamiliar. The system chooses what it knows. This is why burnout doesn't disappear overnight. Your body learned to survive a certain way. It won't unlearn that instantly, especially not if pressure returns quickly. Survival mode also explains the strange symptoms: why your jaw is tight, why your shoulders don't drop, why your breath stays shallow. Your body is holding itself together all the time, even when you sit down, even when you lie in bed, even when you tell yourself to relax. The system doesn't listen to words. It listens to experience. It asks one question constantly: is it safe now? And for many burned out people, the answer has been not yet for a very long time. Survival mode also narrows your world. You think shorter term. You choose predictability over possibility. You avoid things that feel uncertain, even if they once brought joy. This isn't laziness. It's conservation. Your system is protecting limited energy. Anything extra feels risky. Motivation drops here. Not because you don't care, because your system is prioritizing safety over growth. Growth requires risk. Survival mode prefers familiarity, even if familiarity is draining. That's why people stay in environments that exhaust them. They're known. This chapter matters because once you understand survival mode, you stop fighting yourself. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What has my system been protecting me from?" Burnout is not weakness. It's a system that stayed on duty too long. That deserves understanding, not punishment. In the next part of this chapter, we'll talk about how survival mode affects emotion, why numbness, irritability, and
and shutdown happen, and why none of them mean you're broken. For now, let this land. If your body won't relax, it's not defying you. It's guarding you.
When protection becomes exhaustion. There is something important to understand about survival mode. It begins as protection, but over time, it becomes exhausting. Your nervous system did not choose survival mode to harm you. It chose it to keep you functioning. And it succeeded. You kept going. You showed up when you were tired. You handled responsibilities when you felt empty. You stayed alert when rest wasn't available. That took strength. But survival mode is not designed for long-term living. It is designed for emergencies. When emergencies never end, the system never powers down. That's where burnout deepens. In survival mode, your body prioritizes immediacy. What's urgent? What's required? What can't wait? Long-term needs get postponed. Creativity, curiosity, play, joy. Those are not essential for survival. So the system dims them. This is why life starts to feel flat. Not sad, not hopeless, just muted. Many people describe this as numbness. But numbness is not absence. It's suppression. Your system is turning down volume to reduce load. Survival mode also explains irritability. When resources are low, tolerance drops. Small things feel big. Interruptions feel threatening. This is not because you're becoming unkind. It's because your system has no buffer. Everything feels like one demand too many. That's depletion, not personality. Survival mode narrows emotional range. High highs and low lows both disappear. You hover in the middle. Stable, but disconnected. This is often mistaken for emotional maturity. It doesn't bother me anymore. But indifference born from exhaustion is not peace. It's fatigue. Another quiet effect of survival mode is difficulty resting deeply. Even when you're safe, your body doesn't trust it. Trust takes repetition. And safety hasn't been consistent. Your system learned a rule. If I relax, something will be missed. So it stays alert. Not anxious, vigilant. Vigilance consumes energy, even in stillness. That's why burnout feels like constant tiredness without release. The body never gets a full exhale. Here's something relieving. You cannot think your way out of survival mode. It is not a mindset. It is a physiological state. This is why affirmations fail. Why positive thinking feels hollow. The body needs evidence, not encouragement. Evidence that slowing down is allowed. Evidence that mistakes are survivable. Evidence that rest doesn't lead to collapse. That evidence must be experienced.
burnout recovery is not about convincing yourself you're safe. It's about showing your system that safety exists now. Consistently. Gently. This chapter matters because many people shame themselves for being stuck. But stuck is what survival mode looks like when it has nowhere else to go. You are not resistant to healing. Your system just hasn't learned that healing is possible yet. That learning takes time and patience. In the next chapter, we'll talk about motivation, why it disappears early in burnout, and why losing motivation is actually a signal, not a failure. For now, let this settle. If your body feels like it won't slow down, it's not because you're broken. It's because it stayed on duty for too long. And it doesn't know it can rest yet.
Chapter 7. The loss of motivation is a signal. Why motivation disappears before collapse. When wanting stops. One of the first things people notice in burnout is not exhaustion. It's the loss of motivation. You wake up and nothing pulls you forward. Not because you don't care, but because the feeling of wanting is gone. That absence is frightening. People panic when motivation disappears. They think something is wrong with them. I used to want things. I used to be driven. I used to care. The fear is not about productivity. It's about identity. If I don't want things anymore, who am I? Here's what no one tells you. Motivation is not a personality trait. It's a response. And responses change when systems are overloaded. Motivation disappears when your system decides that effort is no longer safe. Not consciously. Biologically. Your body pulls the brake before something breaks. This is why motivation fades before collapse. It's an early warning. A signal that says, something needs to change. But because we don't understand it, we fight it. We try to force motivation back. We shame ourselves. We push harder. We compare ourselves to others. All of that increases pressure. And pressure is what triggered the shutdown. Motivation loss is often mislabeled as laziness. But laziness is a choice. Burnout is not. Burnout removes desire to protect capacity. Think about this. If your phone battery is at 2%, it doesn't open more apps. It shuts things down. That's not failure. That's preservation. Your nervous system does the same. When energy is low, it reduces output. Motivation is output. So it goes first. This is why you can still function but feel empty. You do what's required, but nothing feels optional anymore. Optional requires surplus. Burnout removes surplus. Everything feels heavy. Because everything costs something. When nothing feels worth the cost, motivation disappears. That is not weakness. Loss of motivation is the body saying, I cannot afford enthusiasm right now. Enthusiasm requires energy. Energy is being conserved. So desire
is paused. This pause is often misunderstood. People say, "You just need discipline," or "push through it." But pushing through a signal teaches your system it's not allowed to protect you. That leads to deeper burnout, because now the system has to shut down harder to be heard. This is when numbness appears, or anxiety. Motivation loss is not the problem. It's the message. The problem is ignoring it or punishing yourself for it. Another reason motivation disappears is because hope feels risky. Wanting things opens you to disappointment. Burned-out systems avoid disappointment. They stay neutral. Neutral feels safer than hopeful. Hope asks you to invest energy without guarantee. Burnout says, "We can't afford that right now." So desire goes quiet. This doesn't mean motivation is gone forever. It means it's resting, waiting for conditions that feel safer. Motivation returns when safety returns. Many people think they must find motivation to begin recovery. It's the opposite. Recovery creates the conditions where motivation can come back. Slowly. This chapter matters because people blame themselves for losing drive. But drive is not lost when you fail. It's paused when you're overwhelmed. That pause is intelligent. In the next part of this chapter, we'll talk about what happens when motivation is forced. Why forcing effort backfires. And how listening to this signal actually speeds recovery. For now, let this be enough. If you don't feel motivated, it doesn't mean you're broken. It means your system is asking for something different. What happens when you ignore the signal? When motivation disappears, most people react the same way. They panic. They assume something has gone wrong. And panic makes them push. They try to force themselves to feel what they used to feel. They add pressure. They add rules. They add guilt. They tell themselves, just do it anyway. Sometimes that works for a short time. But forcing motivation does not restore energy. It spends what little remains. This is how people move from burnout into collapse. Not suddenly, gradually. When a system says, "I don't have the capacity," and you ignore it, the system learns a lesson. It learns that subtle signals won't be respected, so it sends stronger ones. This is why anxiety appears, or emotional numbness, or physical symptoms that don't seem to have a clear cause. The body escalates. Motivation loss is the first warning. Anxiety is the second. Shutdown comes later. None of these are random. They are communication. Your system trying to slow you down without language. When you listen early, recovery is gentler. When you don't, the system has to stop you. Many people say, "I don't have a choice, I have to keep going." That belief keeps burnout alive, because the nervous system hears there is no exit. No exit equals danger. When danger feels endless, motivation disappears completely. Not temporarily, protectively. Desire shuts down to conserve survival energy. This is when people feel empty. Not sad, not angry, just flat. They say things like, "I don't want anything anymore." That sentence scares them, but it shouldn't. It's not a loss of identity. It's a pause. A system saying, "Let me catch up." But society doesn't allow pauses. So people push through. and pushing through disconnects you from yourself. You stop checking in. You stop asking what you need. You focus only on output. This deepens burnout, because motivation cannot exist without connection. Motivation comes from meaning. Meaning requires presence. Presence requires safety. Burnout removes safety, so meaning goes quiet. Without meaning, motivation has nothing to attach to, so it fades. Here's something important. Motivation does not return because you demand it. It returns because conditions change. Less pressure, more honesty, more permission. This is why recovery does not start with effort. It starts with listening. Listening to what your lack of motivation has been trying to say, not judging it. People often ask, when will motivation come back? There's no date. Motivation returns gradually, quietly. First, energy returns. Then curiosity. Then small sparks of interest. Motivation comes last. This order matters. If you try to skip steps, you push yourself backwards. Energy before motivation. Safety before desire. This chapter exists to remove the fear around motivation loss. Fear keeps people stuck. Understanding creates space. Space allows recovery. If motivation has left you, let this land. It did not abandon you. It stepped back to protect you. It's waiting for conditions that feel kinder. In the next chapter, we'll talk about emotional numbness, why feeling flat is not emptiness, and how numbness is often the system's way of preventing overload. For now, remember this. Losing motivation does not mean you are failing. It means your system is asking for a different pace.
Chapter 8. Emotional numbness isn't emptiness. Why feeling flat is your system protecting you. When feelings go quiet. One of the most frightening experiences in burnout is not sadness, it's numbness. You don't feel broken, you feel nothing. People often say, I don't feel like myself anymore. Not because something hurts, but because nothing does. No strong joy, no deep sadness. Just a flatness that's hard to describe. This scares people more than pain. Pain at least feels alive. Numbness feels empty. And emptiness makes people panic. They start asking questions. Am I depressed? Did something inside me die? Will I ever feel again? Those questions come from fear. But numbness is not what people think it is. Numbness is not the absence of emotion. It's the absence of access. Your feelings haven't disappeared, they've been placed behind a barrier. That barrier exists for a reason. It's not malfunction, it's protection. Your system deciding that feeling everything right now would be too much. Emotional numbness often appears after long periods of overwhelm. Not one event, not one trauma, but many moments of holding it together. Holding emotions back, holding responsibility, holding expectations, holding pressure. Eventually, the system says, we can't keep processing all of this. So it reduces input. It turns the volume down, not off, down. This is how numbness works. It narrows emotional range to prevent overload. Not because you're weak, because you're human. Numbness often shows up in people who were very emotional before. People who felt deeply, people who cared intensely. Feeling deeply without enough safety leads to shutdown. This is why numbness feels confusing. You remember feeling more. You wonder where that version of you went. But that version didn't disappear.
It went quiet to survive. Just like motivation did, just like joy did, just like curiosity did. Numbness is the nervous system's emergency brake. It stops emotional flooding. Flooding is dangerous, so the system limits exposure. This is not permanent, but it feels permanent when you're inside it, because numbness blocks contrast. You can't feel better if you can't feel much at all. People often try to force feelings back. They seek stimulation, drama, intensity, distraction. But stimulation doesn't restore feeling. It overwhelms the system further, which reinforces numbness. The system responds by pulling back even more. This creates a cycle. Another misunderstanding about numbness is thinking it means you don't care. You still care, you just can't access the feeling right now. Caring requires energy. Burnout removes surplus energy, so emotions are rationed. Only the essentials remain: safety, functioning, survival. This is why numbness often coexists with high responsibility. You keep showing up, you keep doing what's required, but you feel disconnected while doing it. Disconnection is a coping strategy, not a flaw. It allows you to continue without breaking. That matters. Numbness also protects against disappointment. If you don't feel hope, you can't lose it. If you don't feel joy, you can't miss it. That logic makes sense to a burned-out system. But numbness is not peace, it's containment. Peace is spacious. Numbness is tight. The goal of recovery is not to eliminate numbness immediately. That would feel unsafe. The goal is to understand it. Understanding creates trust. Trust allows gradual opening. Gradual opening prevents overwhelm. That's how feeling returns safely, not all at once. This chapter matters because many people fear numbness. They think it means something is wrong. But numbness is often a sign that your system has been working very hard to protect you. It deserves compassion. In the next part of this chapter, we'll talk about what happens when numbness begins to lift, why emotions often return unevenly, and how to allow feeling back without flooding or panic. For now, let this settle. If you feel numb, you are not empty. You are protected, and protection can soften.
When feeling starts to return, and why it feels strange. One of the hardest parts of numbness is not being numb. It's what happens when numbness starts to lift. Most people expect feeling to return like a switch turning back on. Suddenly joyful. Suddenly emotional. Suddenly alive again. That's not how it works. Feeling returns unevenly. At first, it comes in fragments. A moment of sadness with no clear reason. A sudden wave of irritation. A brief spark of interest that disappears quickly. This confuses people. They think something is wrong. Why do I feel worse? Why am I emotional now? Why can't I control this? But this is not regression. This is thawing. Frozen systems don't melt evenly. They soften at the edges first. That softness can feel messy. When numbness lifts, your system is testing safety. It releases a little emotion to see what happens. If the emotion is judged, suppressed, or pushed away, the system tightens again. If the emotion is allowed without panic, the system learns that feeling is survivable. That learning matters. This is why people often say, "I was numb, and now I feel overwhelmed." They confuse overwhelm with failure, but overwhelm is not danger. It's sensation returning. Burnout teaches the system that emotions are expensive, so it releases them slowly, like rationing food, a little at a time. This is also why joy can feel distant. Joy requires openness. Openness feels risky to a system that learned to close. so joy returns later. Sadness often comes first, not because things are getting worse, but because sadness is familiar. It feels safer than hope. Anger may appear too. Anger signals boundary awareness. It often shows up when you start realizing how much you carried. That anger deserves space. Many people shut emotions down again because they feel too much. They say, "I can't handle this." But handling emotion doesn't mean controlling it. It means allowing it to pass without adding fear. Emotions are temporary states. They rise. They peak. They fall. Numbness interrupts the cycle. Recovery restores it. This chapter matters because people often mistake emotional return for instability. But instability is not danger. It's movement. Movement means the system is waking up. The goal is not to feel everything. The goal is to feel safely. Safety comes from pacing, slow exposure. You don't force feeling. You make room for it. You notice it without judging. You let it exist without asking it to teach you anything. Yet, this is why recovery is gentle, not dramatic. Small moments of connection matter more than breakthroughs. A genuine laugh, a tear that surprises you, a quiet interest in something small. Those are signs of life returning, not goals to chase. If you feel numb and then suddenly emotional, you're not going backward, you're thawing, and thawing can feel strange. Let this settle. Numbness was your system protecting you when it couldn't feel safely. Feeling returns when safety begins to exist again, slowly, unevenly. Naturally, in the next chapter we'll talk about invisible weight, the responsibilities and emotional load you've been carrying without realizing, and why burnout often comes from what no one sees. For now, remember this: you're not empty, you are protected, and protection can soften. Chapter 9. You've been carrying too much invisible responsibilities and emotional weight. The weight no one sees. Most people think burnout comes from doing too much work, too many hours, too many tasks. But burnout often comes from something quieter, something invisible. It comes from what you carry that no one counts. The things you hold without being asked. Responsibilities that were never written down. Emotions that were never acknowledged. Expectations that were never agreed to but somehow became yours. That is where burnout grows. You may not even realize how much you're carrying, because you've been doing it for so long. It feels normal, but normal does not mean light. Invisible weight looks like being the reliable one, the one who remembers, the one who notices, the one who holds things together. You become the backup system for everyone else, and no one asks who supports you. You anticipate problems before they happen. You manage emotions that aren't yours. You smooth situations to prevent conflict. That costs energy. Emotional labor is real, even if it's never named, even if it's never thanked, even if it's expected. Many people burn out not because they work too hard, but because they are always on for others, always monitoring, always adjusting, always carrying the emotional climate. This kind of weight doesn't look dramatic. There's no crisis, no breakdown, just slow depletion. You may say, "I don't do that much." But look closer. How often are you bracing for reactions? How often are you managing moods? How often do you silence yourself to keep things calm? How often do you carry responsibility that was never explicitly yours? This is invisible effort. And invisible effort is exhausting because it has no end. Tasks finish. Emotional vigilance doesn't. You don't clock out of awareness. You don't rest from being needed. This chapter matters because many people feel tired and can't explain why. They look at their schedule and think it doesn't justify the exhaustion. But the schedule is not the full story. The unseen load is. Carrying invisible weight also creates guilt. You feel tired but think you shouldn't. Others seem to manage. So you question yourself. That self-doubt adds more weight. Now you're carrying exhaustion and shame. That combination drains quickly and quietly. Invisible weight often starts early. Maybe you learned to be the strong one. Maybe you became emotionally aware before you were ready. Maybe you learned that peace depended on you. Children who manage adults' emotions grow into adults who manage everyone's emotions. Not because they want to, because it feels necessary. Because it feels unsafe not to. Burnout grows when responsibility is disconnected from choice. When you feel obligated instead of willing, that difference matters. Invisible weight also hides success. People see your output, but not the cost. They assume you're fine. You've always handled things. So no one checks in. No one relieves you. No one notices the strain until something gives. And even then they're surprised. This chapter is not about blaming others. It's about naming reality. You cannot lighten a load you haven't acknowledged. And you can't recover from weight you pretend isn't there. In the next part of this chapter, we'll talk about how carrying too much disconnects you from your own needs. Why people who carry the most often ask for the least, and how beginning to put weight down is not selfish. For now, let this land. If you're exhausted and can't explain why, you may not be weak. You may just be carrying more than anyone sees. When carrying becomes your identity. When you carry invisible weight long enough, it stops feeling like something you do. It starts feeling like who you are. You become the reliable one. The one people lean on. The one who doesn't fall apart. The one who handles things quietly. That identity feels meaningful. It gives you purpose. It makes you useful. And usefulness can feel like safety. But usefulness can also trap you, because when your value is tied to carrying, putting weight down feels wrong. It feels selfish. It feels irresponsible. So you keep holding, even when it hurts, even when you're exhausted, even when you're disappearing inside. People who carry a lot often don't ask for help, not because they don't need it, because they don't trust it. They've learned that things fall apart when they stop holding. So they stay alert, always watching, always adjusting, always compensating. This constant readiness drains energy even when nothing is happening. Your body never fully rests. Your mind never fully lets go. Your system stays engaged. Carrying invisible weight also distorts your sense of choice. You stop asking, "Do I want to do this?" and start asking, "Can I afford not to?" That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. When obligation replaces choice, burnout grows, because choice renews energy. Obligation consumes it, another quiet cost of carrying too much is resentment. Not loud resentment. Not anger you express. The quiet kind. The kind that sits in your chest when you feel unseen. The kind that makes you pull away emotionally. The kind that turns warmth into distance. That resentment isn't cruelty. It's unmet need, a signal that something is unbalanced. But instead of addressing the imbalance, many people turn the resentment inward. They shame themselves for feeling it. "I shouldn't feel this way. They didn't ask me to. I'm just being dramatic." That self-silencing adds another layer of weight. Now you're carrying the responsibility and the guilt for feeling burdened. That combination is heavy, and it accelerates burnout, because there's no release. Invisible weight also disconnects you from your own limits. You stop noticing when you're tired. You push past early signals. You normalize depletion. By the time you realize you're overwhelmed, you're already deep in it. Your body has been whispering for a while. But whispers are easy to ignore until they become alarms. This chapter is not telling you to drop everything. It's inviting you to notice. Notice what you carry. Notice why. Some weight is chosen. Some weight is inherited. Some weight was taken on in moments when you didn't feel you had a choice. All of that matters. Recovery begins when weight becomes visible. You can't set down what you can't see, and you can't renegotiate what was never acknowledged. Naming is not weakness, it's clarity. And clarity creates options. Options restore energy. Energy allows change. Putting weight down does not mean you stop caring. It means you care sustainably. It means you stop sacrificing yourself to keep things running. That sacrifice has a cost. You're allowed to ask who benefits from your exhaustion. Not to accuse, but to understand. Understanding changes patterns. You're also allowed to feel sad about how much you carried. Grief is part of recovery. Grief for the energy you lost. Grief for the rest you didn't get. That grief does not mean you failed. It means you endured, and endurance without relief leads to burnout. That's not a flaw. This chapter exists to give language to your tiredness. To say, your exhaustion makes sense. You didn't imagine it. You didn't exaggerate it. If you've been carrying invisible weight, you deserve relief. Not through collapse, through awareness, through permission. In the next chapter, we'll look at how culture trains us to carry too much, how constant productivity quietly normalizes burnout, and why many people feel guilty for needing rest at all. For now, let this land. If you're tired in a way sleep doesn't fix, you may not need more rest. You may need to put something down. Chapter 10: Productivity Culture and Quiet Damage. Why constant pushing trained your burnout. When doing more became normal. Most people don't remember when it started. The pressure to do more. Not because it arrived loudly, but because it crept in quietly. It showed up as encouragement. Stay busy. Don't waste time. Keep pushing. At first, it felt motivating. It felt responsible. It felt like adulthood. You weren't being forced. You were being praised. Praised for staying late. Praised for handling more. Praised for not complaining. Slowly, effort became your identity. Rest became suspicious. Stillness felt lazy. Pausing felt like falling behind. This is how productivity culture works. It doesn't demand collapse. It demands constant output. And constant output looks healthy. Until it isn't, until your body keeps going. But your system starts shutting down. Productivity culture trains you to override signals. Not consciously. Repeatedly. You learn to ignore fatigue. You learn to dismiss emotional heaviness. You learn to push through numbness. You learn to normalize depletion. Because stopping feels dangerous. Dangerous to your image. Dangerous to your stability. Dangerous to how others see you. So you keep going. What no one tells you is that productivity culture doesn't just drain energy. It rewires your nervous system. Your body adapts to pressure. Your baseline shifts. Stress becomes normal. Urgency becomes default. Eventually, calm feels unfamiliar, even unsafe. That's when rest stops working, because your system doesn't know how to receive it. This is why time off doesn't fix burnout. Why sleep doesn't restore motivation. Why weekends feel too short even when nothing big happens. Your system is still in push mode. Productivity culture also trains comparison. You measure your worth against output, against speed, against visibility. You stop asking, "How do I feel?" and start asking, "How much did I do?" That question slowly disconnects you from yourself, because feelings don't produce metrics, and burnout doesn't show up on checklists. Until it does. Another quiet damages the loss of internal permission. You stop allowing yourself to slow down unless there's a valid reason. Illness. Crisis. You need justification to rest. And when there is none, you feel guilty. That guilt keeps you moving, even when you're empty. Productivity culture rewards visible effort, not sustainable effort. So people learn to perform productivity, staying busy instead of staying well. This performance is exhausting. It requires masking, smiling when tired, agreeing when overwhelmed, saying "I'm fine" when you're not. That emotional labor is invisible, and it adds weight. Quietly, over time, something breaks. Not dramatically. Gradually. You stop caring the same way. Not because you're lazy. Because your system is protecting you. Detachment becomes relief. Numbness becomes rest. This is where many people get confused. They think they've lost motivation. But what they've lost is capacity. Capacity was spent without recovery. Productivity culture rarely teaches recovery. It teaches endurance. And endurance without relief leads to shutdown. That shutdown is burnout. Burnout is not weakness. It's the predictable result of long-term overextension, especially when effort is disconnected from meaning or choice. This chapter is not about blaming work or ambition. It's about naming a system that benefits from your exhaustion and calls it dedication. When you understand this, something important shifts. You stop seeing burnout as personal failure and start seeing it as an environmental response. That shift matters because shame keeps burnout alive. Understanding loosens it. And loosening is the first step toward recovery, not rushing. We'll talk about how to untangle your identity from productivity, how to rebuild self-worth without constant output, and how to work, live, and contribute without draining yourself again. For now, let this settle. If pushing is the only way, you know how to function. Your system may be asking for a different way to live. Untangling your worth from output. One of the deepest damages productivity culture causes is not exhaustion. It's identity confusion. When you live long enough being praised for output, you start believing output is who you are, not something you do. You stop separating effort from existence. You feel valuable when you're useful, invisible when you're not. That's not motivation. That's conditional self-worth. And conditional self-worth is exhausting to maintain, because it means you're never allowed to just be. You must always earn rest, always justify slowing down, always prove you deserve space. Over time, this creates fear. Not fear of failure. Fear of stopping. Because stopping feels like disappearing. This is why many burned-out people panic during rest. Their body slows down, but their mind stays alert, scanning, worrying, Am I wasting time? Should I be doing more? What if I fall behind? Those thoughts don't mean you're weak. They mean your system was trained to equate motion with safety and stillness with danger. But here's the truth that changes everything. You are not valuable because of what you produce. You never were. Productivity culture taught you otherwise, because it benefits from your constant output. But your nervous system doesn't benefit from endless demand. It needs cycles, effort and recovery, focus and release. When those cycles are broken, the system compensates by shutting down emotion, by dulling motivation, by reducing desire. That's not sabotage. That's self-preservation. Many people try to fix burnout by becoming more disciplined. But discipline without compassion is just another form of pressure. Real recovery doesn't begin by asking, "How do I push again?" It begins by asking, "What have I been ignoring?" Ignored signals, ignored limits, ignored needs, ignored the cost of always being on. To untangle your worth from productivity, you must rebuild internal permission. Permission to pause. Permission to move slower. Permission to exist without proving. This doesn't mean becoming careless. It means becoming regulated. There's a difference. Carelessness avoids responsibility. Regulation chooses responsibility sustainably. One drains you. The other supports you. Burnout often comes from confusing the two. Another quiet shift is learning to work with energy, not against it. Productivity culture ignores energy. It only respects time. But energy fluctuates. Some days you have capacity. Some days you don't. Pushing equally on all days creates imbalance. And imbalance accumulates. Recovering from this doesn't mean abandoning goals. It means adjusting expectations to reality. It means asking, what is realistic today? Not, what should I be able to do? This shift alone reduces burnout pressure because it reconnects action to honesty instead of force. Honesty is stabilizing. Another important piece is redefining success. Success is not how much you endure. It's how well you recover. It's how consistently you can show up without losing yourself. People who last are not the ones who push hardest. They are the ones who listen earliest. They notice fatigue before collapse. They adjust before burnout. This is not weakness. It's intelligence. Emotional intelligence. Physiological intelligence. Productivity culture doesn't reward listening, but your nervous system does. And your long-term life depends on it. Burnout teaches this lesson painfully. If you're here listening to this, something in you already knows. You don't need another push. You need a different relationship with effort. One that doesn't cost you your aliveness. Recovery begins when you stop asking, how do I become more productive? And start asking, how do I become more present? Presence restores energy. Presence restores clarity. Presence restores motivation naturally, without forcing. This doesn't happen overnight, but it begins the moment you stop treating exhaustion as a moral failure and start treating it as information. Important information. In the next chapter, we'll talk about recovery the way it actually works. Not doing less. Not quitting life. But rebuilding capacity safely. For now, let this land. You are not broken. You were trained to survive. In a system that didn't teach restoration. And survival has a cost. Naming that cost is not giving up. It's the beginning of choosing differently. Chapter 11. Recovery is not doing less. What real recovery actually looks like. Why stopping alone doesn't heal you. When people hear the word recovery, they often imagine stopping. Stopping work. Stopping effort. Stopping responsibility. They imagine rest as the solution. If I could just take a break. If I could just sleep more. If I could just step away for a while. Then I'll feel like myself again. But here's the quiet truth. Most burned out people have tried resting. They slept longer. They took time off. They canceled plans. They slowed their pace. And yet, the heaviness stayed. The fog stayed. The lack of motivation stayed. That doesn't mean rest is useless. It means rest alone is incomplete. Recovery is not the same thing as rest. Rest pauses the system. Recovery retrains it. If rest was enough, burnout wouldn't keep coming back. But burnout returns because the pattern didn't change. Think of it this way. If you keep driving with a flat tire, pulling over helps. But if you start driving again, without fixing the tire, you'll break down again. Many people rest, then return to the exact same rhythm. The same pressure, the same self-talk, the same expectations. And when they crash again, they blame themselves. I guess I didn't rest enough. That's not true. You rested from effort, but you didn't recover from the way you relate to effort. Recovery begins when you stop asking, "How do I stop working?" and start asking, "How do I stop living in survival mode?" Burnout is not caused by work alone. It's caused by constant internal pressure. The pressure to perform, to keep up, to not fall behind, to not disappoint. That pressure often continues, even when you're resting. That's why many burned-out people feel restless during rest. Their body slows down, but their mind doesn't feel safe. Safety is missing. And without safety, recovery cannot happen. Recovery requires regulation, not collapse, not escape. Regulation means teaching your system that it is allowed to slow down without consequences. That takes time. Your nervous system learned over years that slowing down was dangerous. Dangerous to your job. Dangerous to your image. Dangerous to your sense of worth. So when you rest, your body stays alert, waiting for the threat. This is why recovery must be active. Not passive, not in the sense of doing more, but in the sense of retraining safety. Real recovery teaches your system three things. You can slow down without losing everything. You can move without forcing. You can exist without proving. None of those lessons come from sleep alone. They come from repetition, small experiences of safety, over time. This is why rushing recovery backfires. People say, "I rested, so why am I not better?" Because your system doesn't trust rest yet. Trust must be rebuilt. Recovery is about restoring capacity, not eliminating effort. You're not meant to stop engaging with life. You're meant to engage differently, with awareness instead of urgency. Another misunderstanding is believing recovery means becoming soft. It doesn't. It means becoming sustainable. Sustainability is strength that lasts. Burnout happened because your strength was unprotected. You kept giving without buffering. Recovery builds buffers. Emotional buffers. Mental buffers. Physical buffers. These buffers prevent collapse. They don't slow you down forever. They stabilize you. Stability is what allows progress later. Many people fear recovery because they think they'll lose momentum. But burnout already took your momentum. Recovery gives it back, gradually, without the crash. Here's something important to hear. If pushing harder worked, it would have worked already. The fact that it didn't is not a failure. It's feedback. Your system is asking for a different strategy. One that doesn't rely on adrenaline. One that doesn't depend on fear. One that doesn't punish you for being human. Recovery is not quitting. It's correcting course. It's choosing longevity over urgency, depth over speed. In recovery, you don't ask, "How much can I push today?" You ask, "What supports me staying steady?" That question changes everything, because it brings honesty into effort, instead of force. Honesty creates safety. And safety is what allows energy to return, not motivation. Energy comes first. Motivation follows later. This chapter is not about instructions yet. It's about understanding. Understanding why doing less didn't fix you, and why that doesn't mean you're broken. In the next part, we'll talk about what recovery actually looks like day to day. Not dramatic changes, but small shifts that retrain your system. Gently. For now, let this settle. You don't need to disappear to heal. You need to feel safe while you're still here. Rebuilding capacity without pressure. Real recovery does not arrive as relief. It arrives as adjustment. It's not the feeling of being suddenly rested. It's the experience of being less reactive. Most people miss this. They wait to feel better before trusting recovery is working. But recovery shows up quietly, in smaller reactions, in steadier days, in fewer crashes. Recovery looks like noticing when you're tired, before you're exhausted. That awareness alone is progress. It looks like stopping one step earlier than you used to. Not stopping everything, just stopping sooner. That is regulation. Recovery also looks boring. No breakthroughs. No dramatic shifts. Just repetition. The same small supports, again and again. This frustrates people. They want recovery to feel meaningful. They want evidence. But recovery isn't about proof. It's about safety. And safety is built slowly. One of the first signs recovery is working is boredom. Because urgency fades. When you're no longer running on adrenaline, things feel quieter. That quiet can feel unsettling. Many people mistake that quiet for emptiness. It's not. It's the absence of pressure. And pressure was loud. Another sign recovery is working is resistance. Not from your body. From your identity. The part of you that learned to survive through effort. doesn't trust slowing down. That part says, "You're falling behind. You're wasting time. You should be doing more." That voice isn't truth. It's habit, and habits resist change. Recovery requires responding differently to that voice. Not arguing with it. Not obeying it. Just noticing it. Noticing creates space. Space reduces pressure. Pressure reduction restores energy. That sequence matters. Many people try to recover by adding more self-care. But recovery is not another task. It's a change in relationship, with time, with effort, with self-expectation. Recovery asks different questions. Instead of "How much can I handle?" it asks, "What supports me staying steady?" Instead of "How do I push through this?" it asks, "What am I ignoring right now?" Those questions slow you down. Not to stop you, to protect you. Recovery also requires grieving who you thought you had to be. The version of you who never stopped. The version who endured everything. That identity carried you for a while. But it also cost you. Grief is part of letting go. Not because that version was wrong, but because it's no longer sustainable. Many people resist grief because they think it will pull them backward. It doesn't. It releases stored tension. It creates room. Recovery often looks like doing less, with more presence, fewer commitments, clearer boundaries, more honesty about capacity. That honesty can feel uncomfortable, especially if you're used to being capable. But honesty prevents collapse, and collapse is not growth. As recovery deepens, you may notice energy returning in waves. Not all at once. Not predictably. That's normal. Energy comes back before motivation. That's important. Don't wait to want things again. Just notice when you have a little more capacity. Recovery is successful when effort feels optional, not forced. When you can engage without fear. When rest doesn't come with guilt. Those are signs of healing. The goal is not to avoid stress forever. It's to recover from stress properly. Stress without recovery damages. Stress with recovery strengthens. This is what people miss. Burnout wasn't caused by stress alone. It was caused by stress without safety, without pause, without release. Recovery rebuilds that missing piece. It teaches your system that effort can exist without danger. This chapter matters because many people think they're failing recovery. They're not. They're just expecting it to feel dramatic. Recovery is subtle. It's the absence of collapse, the return of steadiness, the quiet ability to show up again, without fear. In the next chapter, we'll talk about how feeling begins to return. Not all at once, not overwhelmingly, but safely. For now, remember this. You don't need to disappear to heal. You don't need to become someone else. You need to learn how to stay with yourself, without pressure. That is what real recovery looks like. Chapter 12. Learning to Feel Again, Safely. How to reconnect without overwhelm. Why feeling went away in the first place. One of the most confusing parts of burnout is not exhaustion. It's disconnection. You notice that things don't hit the same. Good news feels distant. Bad news feels muted. You don't feel deeply sad, but you don't feel deeply happy either. You feel flat. Many people describe this as emptiness, but emptiness is not the right word. Nothing is missing. Something is protected. Your system didn't stop feeling because it failed. It stopped feeling because it was overwhelmed. Feeling requires capacity. Emotions are not just thoughts. They are physical experiences. They move through the body. When the body is under constant pressure, it reduces sensation. Not consciously, automatically. This is not emotional weakness. It's survival. Just like your body numbs pain in an accident, your system numbs emotion under long-term stress. Burnout teaches the nervous system one lesson. Feeling is expensive, so the system adapts. It lowers intensity. It blunts reactions. It keeps you functioning by reducing depth. This is why people often say, "I'm not sad, I just don't feel much." That's not emptiness. That's protection. And protection has a purpose. But protection also has a cost. Because numbness keeps pain away. But it also keeps joy away. Connection. Interest. Desire. This chapter matters. Because many people panic when they realize they don't feel like themselves. They think something is wrong. They fear they're broken. They try to force feeling back. Forcing doesn't work. It overwhelms the system again. And the system responds by shutting down harder. This creates a cycle. Numb, panic, pressure, more numbness. Recovery requires a different approach. You don't demand feeling. You invite it. Slowly. Safely. Before feeling can return. Your system needs to trust that it's safe to feel. Safety always comes first. This is where many people get stuck. They try to feel without creating safety. They dive into emotion. They push introspection. And suddenly they feel overwhelmed, anxious, or unstable. Then they conclude, "I'm not ready." But readiness isn't about strength. It's about pacing. Your system opens when it feels respected, not when it's pressured. Learning to feel again is not dramatic. It doesn't begin with big emotions. It begins with small signals. Very small. A slight sense of relief. A moment of interest. A brief emotional response. That fades quickly. Those moments matter. They are signs of thawing, not failure. Frozen systems don't melt all at once. They soften at the edges first. Many people misinterpret this phase. They say, "I felt something, and then it went away." They think they lost progress. They didn't. That's how regulation works. Your system tests the water. It releases a little emotion to see what happens. If the emotion is allowed, not judged, not analyzed, not suppressed, the system relaxes slightly. If the emotion is criticized or rushed, the system tightens again. This is learning in real time. Your body is learning that feeling is survivable. That's a big lesson. Another reason feeling doesn't return quickly is because numbness became familiar. Familiar feels safe. Even when it's uncomfortable. Emotion feels unpredictable at first. Unpredictability can feel dangerous to a system that lived in survival mode. So the system approaches slowly. This is why patience matters. Not patience with outcomes. Patience with process. With yourself. Learning to feel again does not mean becoming emotionally flooded. It means restoring range. Range includes neutral. Not every moment needs to feel intense. Recovery doesn't aim for happiness. It aims for responsiveness. The ability to feel appropriately. Without shutdown. Without overwhelm. That ability was not lost. It was paused. And pauses can end. Gently. In the next part of this chapter, we'll talk about what safe reconnection looks like in practice. How to notice early emotional signals. And how to avoid reopening wounds too fast. For now, let this land. If you feel numb, your system is not empty. It's protecting you until safety is restored. Letting sensation come back without forcing. When feeling begins to return, it doesn't arrive as emotion first. It arrives as sensation. A tightening in the chest, a warmth in the stomach, a heaviness behind the eyes. These are not emotions yet. They are signals. The body speaking before the mind names anything. Most people skip this stage. They rush to interpretation. Why do I feel this? What does this mean? Is something wrong? That rush overwhelms the system again. Safe reconnection begins with noticing, without explaining, just awareness. I feel something. Not judging it. Not fixing it. Not turning it into a story. This is difficult at first, especially if you learned that emotions must be solved, or justified, or managed quickly. But emotions don't need management to pass. They need permission. When sensation is allowed to exist, the nervous system stays regulated. It doesn't spike into alarm. This is why forcing emotional release backfires. It activates fear. Fear shuts the system again. So the goal is not intensity. The goal is tolerance. Your system learns. I can feel this and stay safe. Over time, sensation becomes emotion. Emotion becomes meaning. Meaning becomes clarity. That sequence matters. Skipping steps causes overwhelm. Staying present restores trust. Many people worry. They will drown in emotion once numbness lifts. That fear is understandable. But it's rarely true. Because numbness already regulated the intensity. Feeling returns gradually. Because your system is cautious. It does not flood you. What feels overwhelming is often not the emotion itself, but the fear of it. Fear tightens the body. Tightness amplifies sensation. That amplification feels like too much. But it's tension, not emotion. Softening attention reduces intensity. So does slowing down interpretation. This is why grounding matters. Not to distract, but to anchor. Grounding reminds your system that you are here, safe. Simple grounding looks like noticing contact. Feet on the floor, back against the chair, breath moving naturally. No control. This creates a container. Emotions need containers. Without them, they overwhelm. With them, they pass. Another important truth. You do not need to relieve pain to heal. Many people believe healing requires revisiting trauma. Sometimes it does. Often, it doesn't. Your system chooses what's read. Forcing old pain open can destabilize recovery. Healing respects timing. Learning to feel again is not about digging. It's about listening. What wants attention today? Not everything. Just something small. A preference. A reaction. A boundary. You may notice irritation returning first. That's common. Irritation signals limits. Limits were ignored during burnout. You may also notice sadness. Not dramatic grief. Just a quiet ache. That ache is often unprocessed loss. Loss of time. Loss of energy. Loss of self. Letting that sadness exist is healing. Not because sadness fixes anything, but because suppression prolongs pain. You may also notice joy flicker briefly, a laugh that surprises you, interest in something small. Those moments matter. They don't need chasing. Chasing scares them away. They need space and patience. Many people ask, how long until I feel normal again? But normal is not the goal. The goal is responsiveness, being able to feel appropriately again, not constantly, not intensely. Some days will still feel flat. That doesn't erase progress. Recovery is not linear. It oscillates. What matters is trend, not moment. More awareness. More tolerance. Less fear. That is healing. Quiet healing. In the next part, we'll talk about how to stay connected without reopening shutdown. How to recognize when to pause, and how to trust the pace of your system. For now, remember, feeling returns when safety becomes consistent. Not when you force it, not when you demand it. You are not behind. Your system is careful, and care is intelligence. Trusting the pace of return. There is one last thing you need to know about feeling again. It does not return to make you suffer. It returns to help you orient, to guide you back into your life. Emotions are not enemies. They are information. Burnout didn't numb you because you were weak. It numbed you because too much was happening, without enough support. So now when feeling returns slowly, it's not testing you. It's checking if the environment is safe, if you are safe. Each time you notice a sensation, and do not panic. Your system updates its memory. Each time you let an emotion pass, without forcing meaning, your nervous system relaxes. This is how trust is rebuilt. Not through insight, through repetition. Small moments of safety. Small moments of presence. You don't need to open everything at once. You don't need to feel deeply to heal properly. Depth comes later. Stability comes first. If today all you feel is a mild preference, that counts. If today all you notice is tension leaving your shoulders, that counts. If today you simply notice, I'm less shut down than before, that counts too. Healing is cumulative, not dramatic. Some days will still feel dull. That does not mean numbness has returned. It means your system is resting. Rest is not regression. You are learning something new now. How to stay connected without exhausting yourself. How to feel without being consumed. How to be present without pressure. This is emotional maturity. And it is quieter than people expect. Calmer. As feeling stabilizes, something else begins to change. Your energy. Not motivation yet. Not excitement. Just energy. A little more capacity. That's important. Because energy comes before desire. And that is where the next chapter begins. Not with pushing, but with understanding. Why energy returns before motivation ever does. Chapter 13. Energy comes back before motivation. There is something important you need to understand now. If you wait for motivation to return before you change anything, you may wait much longer than necessary. Because motivation is not the first thing to come back. Energy is. Most people get this backward. They tell themselves, I'll start when I feel like it again. I'll move when motivation returns. I'll care when I feel inspired. But burnout doesn't heal in that order. The body recovers first. The nervous system stabilizes first. Only then does motivation reappear. And even then, it returns quietly. This is why so many people think something is still wrong with them. They feel a little more rested, a little more present. But they still don't want much. And that scares them. They think, if I'm healing, shouldn't I feel motivated? The answer is no. Motivation is not a signal of healing. It is a result of capacity. Burnout took your capacity first. So healing gives it back first. Energy is your system saying, I have a little more room now. Motivation is your system saying, I'm ready to reach outward again. That comes later. Always. Think about a phone with a dead battery. It doesn't turn on at 1%. It charges quietly for a while. No screen. No activity. Only when there's enough power does the phone light up. Your mind works the same way. Right now, your energy is charging. That's why motivation hasn't returned yet. Not because you're broken, but because your system is being careful. This is where many people sabotage recovery. They misinterpret this stage. They think, I still don't feel like doing much. So maybe I'm lazy. Or worse, maybe this is just who I am now. That thought alone can stall healing. So let's be clear. Low motivation during recovery is normal. It is protective. Your system is preventing you from overextending again. Motivation disappeared before collapse. It doesn't return immediately after. That doesn't mean you stop living. It means you adjust how you move. This is where small, intentional action matters. Not because you feel inspired, but because action teaches safety. It shows your system that effort no longer equals danger. You don't wait to feel motivated to move. You move gently so motivation can trust you again. This is the part most people never learn. Motivation doesn't respond to pressure. It responds to consistency without punishment, to effort without self-attack. If every attempt comes with judgment, motivation stays away. If every action feels safe and manageable, motivation slowly returns. So what does this look like in real life? It looks smaller than you expect. It looks like doing one thing, even when you feel neutral, not excited, not resistant. Neutral is enough. Neutral is stable ground. You don't need passion to begin again. You need permission. Permission to act without feeling fully ready. Permission to do something imperfectly. This is how energy turns into engagement. And engagement slowly becomes motivation. Notice something important here. Motivation doesn't create action. Action creates motivation. But only when the nervous system feels safe. This is why forcing yourself never worked. It recreated the same pressure that caused burnout. Now the rule is different. You act to support your system, not override it. You choose actions that feel contained. Actions you can finish. Completion matters more than intensity. Your brain needs evidence of follow-through. Each completed action restores trust. Trust rebuilds motivation. This is why doing less doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing what you can finish without depletion. One walk. One task. One honest conversation. Each one tells your system, we can move without collapsing. That message changes everything. Over time, you'll notice something shift. You'll wake up with slightly more interest, slightly more curiosity, slightly more willingness. That's motivation returning. Not loudly, not dramatically, but reliably. This is the kind of motivation that lasts. Not fueled by urgency, but by capacity, by safety, by trust. This is how burnout truly ends. Not when you feel excited again, but when you no longer feel afraid of effort. That's the real milestone. And if you're here, if energy is slowly returning, you're closer than you think. The next chapter matters, because now we move from recovery to redesign, to building a life that doesn't drain you again, not through big changes, but through small, sustainable shifts. Chapter 14. Building a life that doesn't drain you. Why going back to normal is the real danger. There is a quiet mistake many people make after burnout. They recover, and then they try to go back. Back to the same pace. Back to the same expectations. Back to the same version of normal. And slowly, without realizing it, they rebuild the exact conditions that drained them in the first place. This is why burnout often repeats. Not because people didn't learn anything, but because they thought healing meant returning to the old structure. It doesn't. Recovery is not about getting your old life back. It's about building a different one. A life that can hold effort without emptying you. A life that includes rest without guilt. A life where your energy is not constantly borrowed from tomorrow. That's what this chapter is about. Let's say this clearly. If you rebuild the same life, you will eventually feel the same exhaustion. Burnout is not only about how much you do. It's about how your life is organized. The pressure points. The expectations. The constant availability. The way everything quietly demands more than it gives back. You don't need to change everything, but you do need to change the parts that were draining you slowly. This begins with something uncomfortable. Letting go of the idea that exhaustion equals worth. Many people were trained to believe, if I'm tired, I must be doing something right. If I'm overwhelmed, it means I'm important. If I slow down, I'll fall behind. Burnout exposes this lie, because it shows you what happens when worth is built on depletion. A sustainable life does not feel heroic. It feels stable. And stability can feel unfamiliar. When you've lived in urgency for years, sometimes it even feels wrong. You might notice yourself thinking, shouldn't I be doing more? That voice is not ambition. It's conditioning. It learned urgency early. It doesn't know another rhythm yet. So part of building a life that doesn't drain you is learning to disappoint that voice. Gently. Repeatedly. This does not mean lowering your standards. It means changing what your standards measure. Instead of measuring how much you push, you measure how well you recover. Instead of measuring output alone, you measure sustainability. Instead of asking, how much can I handle? You ask, how much can I handle consistently? Consistency is what keeps energy alive. Intensity is what burns it. This is where many people struggle. They want proof that they're better now. They want to feel capable again. So they test themselves too early. They take on too much. They say yes too quickly. They skip the pauses that kept them stable. And then they wonder why exhaustion creeps back. Here's the rule that protects you. If something costs more than it gives, it needs to change, not be endured. That applies to work, to relationships, to habits, even to goals. Burnout was not random. It was information. It showed you where your life was unbalanced. This chapter is about listening to that information. A life that doesn't drain you has margins. Time margins. Energy margins. Emotional margins. Margins are what keep systems alive. Without them, everything runs at breaking point. If your days have no breathing room, your nervous system never stands down. If your schedule has no softness, your body never feels safe. If your expectations have no flexibility, your mind never rests. So the first rebuild is structural, not motivational. You don't need more willpower. You need fewer constant demands. This may mean saying no to things you used to tolerate, reducing unnecessary urgency, creating boundaries that protect recovery. None of this makes you weak. It makes you realistic. Burnout does not mean you can't handle life. It means life was handling you. Now the balance changes. You design a life that works with your system, not against it. This is not about hiding from challenge. It's about choosing challenges that don't hollow you out. In the next part, we'll talk about how to recognize draining patterns early, how to build routines that protect energy, how to prevent relapse without fear, how to live fully without burning yourself down again. This is not the end of effort. It's the end of self-erasure. Designing sustainability instead of survival. Now that you understand why going back to normal is dangerous, we need to talk about what replaces it. A sustainable life is not a smaller life. It is a better organized one. Most burnout comes from one core issue: too much demand placed on a system with no recovery built in. Your body, mind, and emotions are systems. They are not infinite. They need cycles. Effort. Recovery. Effort again. When those cycles disappear, exhaustion becomes permanent. That's what happened before. So now, instead of asking, "How do I push myself better?" you ask, "How do I design my life to support effort?" This starts with noticing where your energy leaks. Not dramatically. Quietly. Pay attention to what consistently leaves you tired after it's done. Not challenged, tired. Some things exhaust because they matter. That's normal. But some things exhaust because they are misaligned. Those are the drains that must be addressed. Examples include being constantly available, carrying emotional responsibility for others, doing work without clear limits, staying in environments that require constant self-control. These don't always feel heavy in the moment, but over time, they flatten you. Sustainability means reducing chronic strain, not avoiding effort entirely. This is where boundaries become essential. Not aggressive ones. Quiet ones. Predictable ones. Boundaries are not walls. They are instructions for how your energy is treated. When boundaries are unclear, your nervous system stays alert. Alert systems burn fuel. That's biology. Clear limits allow the system to relax. Relaxation is what allows recovery. This might mean fixed end times to work, fewer open-ended commitments, less multitasking, more single-focus periods. None of this requires becoming rigid. It requires becoming intentional. Another key shift is redefining productivity. Productivity that destroys energy is not success. You are not here to maximize output. You are here to remain functional, present, and alive. A life that doesn't drain you has space for slower mornings, pauses without justification, days that don't feel optimized, evenings that restore instead of numb. This may feel unfamiliar, especially if your identity was built on endurance. You might feel guilt. That guilt is not truth. It is the echo of old conditioning, the belief that rest must be earned through exhaustion. Burnout already paid that debt. You don't owe it again. Another important practice is pacing. Not everything needs to be done at full intensity. Some days require steadiness, not speed. Some seasons require maintenance, not expansion. A sustainable life respects seasons. Push seasons. Hold seasons. Recover seasons. When everything becomes a push, collapse is inevitable. Sustainability also means adjusting expectations. Not lowering standards, adjusting timelines. Urgency is often artificial, created by pressure, not necessity. Ask yourself, what actually breaks if this takes longer? Often the answer is nothing important. Your nervous system needs proof that slowing down is safe. You provide that proof through experience. Each time you rest and nothing collapses, your system learns. Each time you say no and survive it, your system learns. Each time you protect your energy and remain capable, your system learns. This is how burnout stops repeating. Not through fear, through design, through structure that supports life. A life that doesn't drain you is not passive. It is self-respecting. It allows ambition. Without self-betrayal. It allows contribution. Without disappearance. It allows effort. Without collapse. And most importantly, it allows you to stay present, available, alive. Burnout taught you something critical. You cannot sacrifice yourself and expect to thrive. Now you build differently, not to avoid life, but to actually live it. In the final chapter, we will talk about choice, not big, dramatic decisions, but the daily choice to live differently, to honor what you've learned, to stop apologizing for needing a life that works. That is where this journey closes. Chapter 15. You are allowed to live differently. Rewriting your relationship with effort. By now, something important should be clear. Burnout did not happen because you failed. It happened because the way you were living was asking more than any system could give, and you stayed longer than you should have. This final chapter is not about fixing yourself. It's about choosing a different relationship with effort, rest, and worth. Most people think the goal after burnout is to get back to normal. But normal was the problem. Normal taught you to ignore signals. Normal rewarded endurance over awareness. Normal framed exhaustion as discipline, and rest as weakness. You don't need to return to that. You are allowed to live differently now. Living differently doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing fewer things that cost you everything. It means effort that is chosen, not demanded. Movement that is paced, not forced. You are not quitting ambition. You are redefining it. Ambition without sustainability becomes self-erasure. Ambition with self-respect becomes growth. There is a subtle but important shift happening here. You are moving from proving to honoring, from pushing to listening, from surviving to participating in your own life. This can feel strange at first, especially if your identity was built on being the strong one, the reliable one, the capable one, the one who keeps going no matter what. Letting go of that role may feel like losing yourself, but what you are actually losing is the pressure to disappear for others. Burnout often forces one hard truth into the open. You cannot keep sacrificing yourself and still expect to feel alive. So the question becomes, what does effort look like without self-violation? Effort, when healthy, feels contained. It has edges. It has a beginning and an end. And when it ends, recovery is allowed. Unhealthy effort feels endless. It bleeds into rest. It follows you home. It keeps your nervous system alert even when nothing is wrong. You lived in that state for too long. That's why your system shut things down. Now, effort must be rebuilt carefully. Not through willpower. Through structure. Through limits. Through permission to stop. Yes, permission. Many burned-out people never learned how to stop safely. They only know collapse. So part of living differently is learning to stop before exhaustion, before resentment, before numbness returns. That is not laziness. That is self-command, the ability to regulate effort instead of being driven by it. Living differently also means allowing your worth to exist, even on days you do less. This is hard, because burnout often comes from tying worth to output. to usefulness. But worth that depends on performance will always feel unstable because performance fluctuates. A healthier foundation is this: I matter even when I rest. Not because rest is productive, but because I am human. This belief takes time to settle. Your nervous system may resist it at first. You may feel guilty when things are calm. That guilt is old conditioning leaving the body. Let it pass. Don't obey it. Living differently also means making peace with limits, not fighting them. You are not meant to operate at maximum capacity every day. No system does. Nature rests. Machines overheat. Bodies fatigue. Only humans shame themselves for it. You are allowed to build a life that fits your actual capacity, not an imagined one. This does not make your life smaller. It makes it real. In a real life, energy is protected, focus is chosen, and presence becomes possible again. That's what burnout stole. Presence. The ability to be where you are, without feeling pulled apart. Now slowly, you are reclaiming it, not by force, by permission, by design. By choosing a life that does not require constant self-abandonment. That choice matters, and it is not made once. It is made daily, in small ways, in quiet decisions, in stopping when your body asks, in saying no without explanation, in allowing effort to be enough, not endless. In this part, we'll talk about what happens next, how to carry what you've learned forward, how to live differently without fear of slipping back, and how to choose this life again, even when old patterns try to return. Choosing this life again and again. There is something important to understand before this ends. Choosing a different life does not mean the old one disappears. Old habits don't vanish. Old instincts don't dissolve. They quiet down. And wait. You will still have days when urgency feels familiar, when pushing feels safer than pausing. You may catch yourself thinking, maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I can handle more now. That voice is not evil. It's memory. It remembers how you survived. But survival is not the same as living. This is where choice becomes ongoing. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just steady. Living differently means recognizing early signs. Noticing when your body tightens. When your breathing shortens. When rest starts feeling undeserved. Those are not failures. They are checkpoints. They ask one question. Are you drifting back into endurance mode? And when the answer is yes, you don't shame yourself. You adjust. That's the skill. Burnout recovery is not about never slipping. It's about returning faster. Returning before collapse. Returning before numbness. Returning before resentment. Returning before your life becomes something you tolerate again. This requires self-honesty. Not discipline as punishment, but discipline as care. The kind that protects what matters. You will still have responsibilities. Deadlines. Pressure. Life does not become effortless, but it becomes regulated, contained. Your system learns that effort ends, that rest is real, that you will listen, that you will intervene early, This is how trust is rebuilt. Not through words. Through consistency. Through behavior. Your body begins to believe you again. Your mind stops bracing. Your emotions soften. Presence returns. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to feel moments again. Enough to notice your life instead of racing through it. Enough to care without being consumed. Enough to rest without guilt. That's what living differently feels like. Not dramatic relief. Quiet stability. A sense of I can stay here. This book was never about doing less forever. It was about doing enough. Enough to grow. Enough to contribute. Enough to remain yourself. Enough to feel alive without being emptied. If there is one thing to carry forward, let it be this. Your life does not need to be earned through suffering. You do not need to break to deserve rest. You do not need to disappear to be valuable. You are allowed to build a life that supports you, that respects your limits, that includes pauses, that allows recovery, that doesn't require collapse as a reset. That is not weakness. That is wisdom learned the hard way. And you don't need to relearn it. When old patterns call, pause, check in, ask what is actually required right now. Then choose accordingly. That choice is freedom, not freedom from responsibility. Freedom from self-abandonment. This is not the end of effort. It's the end of effort without care. It's the end of living at the edge of depletion. It's the beginning of sustainability. And that is not boring. It is stable. It is breathable. It is livable. If you forget, return. If you drift, notice. If you feel pressure rising, adjust. You don't need to start over. You only need to come back. That's how this continues. Not with force, but with attention, with respect, with choice. Again and again. You were never lazy. You were overloaded. You were never weak. You were carrying too much for too long. Now you know what that costs. And you know another way exists. You are allowed to live differently. Not someday. Now. Quietly. In ways no one needs to applaud. In ways that keep you here. This is not an ending. It's a permission. To stop burning yourself down. To build something that lasts. And to stay. Stay with yourself. If you're still here. That matters. It means something in you was listening. Not just hearing words, but recognizing truth. This audiobook was never meant to fix you, because you were never broken. It was meant to name what you've been living through, so you could stop fighting yourself in silence. Burnout doesn't always look like collapse. Sometimes it looks like functioning without feeling, like showing up without being present, like surviving days you don't remember. If that was you, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not stuck. You don't need to change your entire life overnight. You don't need a new version of yourself. You only need to stay aware, to notice when you're drifting back into endurance, to pause before you disappear again. This is not about doing less forever. It's about doing enough without losing yourself. And that choice doesn't happen once. It happens quietly, every morning, every boundary, every moment you listen instead of override. Some days you'll remember everything you learned here. Other days you'll forget. That's okay. This isn't a test. That's why this isn't a book you finish. It's one you return to. You return when you feel pressure building again. When rest starts feeling wrong. When effort begins to hurt more than it helps. You return to remind yourself. You're allowed to live differently. Not louder. Not harder. But wiser. More honest. More sustainable. And if this helped you even a little, let that be enough for today. You don't need to rush back into life. Life will still be there. Just stay with yourself. That's where recovery becomes real. We'll be here when you need to listen again. And you will. Because the moment you choose not to abandon yourself is the moment everything starts to change. Quietly, gently, and for good. If this message spoke to you, share it. Subscribe. Keep listening. This is Beyond the Noise Studio.